English humour, a jaunt through the jolly japes of English language humour. Part 11, the sitcom. So, the 20th century's gift from radio and television to the art form of comedy, the sitcom, the situation comedy. We've already seen a few early examples, but here we're going to see quite a few more and look at them a little through the lens of the sociologist, if we can get away with that. Let's start with the premise of the sitcom. What do we need? Ideally, we need a couple of characters, maybe 3, maybe 4, that feed off each other, that astute observers have noticed is usually a situation where the people don't want to be together but can't get away from each other. Not always the case, as the cheerful bar in Cheers in Boston seemed to be a nice enough place to hang around. But think of situations such as a rag and bone dealer and his quite old only son living in a pigsty, the son desperate to get a girlfriend, but the old man never letting him. Or the army, as in the case of Sergeant Bilko, or Dad's Army in England. And we'll find sitcoms set in prisons, seminaries, remote Irish islands, etc. If we include the family in that description of an inescapable situation, well, we can have plenty more. We can have George and Mildred and The Good Life and All in the Family and Till Death Us Do Part, Citizen Smith, South Park, Family Guy. So where did all this begin? Well, the sitcom is hot on the tails of the soap opera, as we call them, due to the original being sponsored by a soap company in America. In Britain, we like to think that the script-writing team of Galton and Simpson can lay claim to the first ever situation comedy, but it seems the Yanks beat us to it with A Life of Bliss, written by Godfrey Harrison, and a better-known example of Life with the Lions. The supposed first British sitcom is the largely forgotten Pinwright's Progress, which was shown in 1946. The Americans were happy to plough their field, with the seeds sown by I Love Lucy, for example, and produced such stellar sitcoms as The Beverly Hillbillies, Cheers, Taxi, a line which you could trace to the present day towards The Simpsons and South Park, and in the 50s, The Phil Silvers Show. You'll Never Get Rich was the original title, and Phil Silvers played Sergeant Ernie Bilko, always scheming, always trying to rip people off, but in the end, never having the heart to, but always putting one over on the Colonel, Melonhead Hall. An admirable ensemble comedy that churned out inventive storylines week after week, driven by the lunatic genius of Phil Silvers as Sergeant Bilko. 138 episodes in total between 1955 and 1959, a favourite of the President, and the original idea for the cartoon series that followed it. Boss Cat, if you're American, Top Cat, if you caught it in Great Britain. And again, Phil Silvers, where did he come from? Well, vaudeville world. Vaudeville and burlesque. His acting style, as you'll see if you catch a few episodes, is greatly exaggerated. In Great Britain, meanwhile, we were watching The Rag and Bone Man and His Trapped Son. Steptoe and Son was the name of the comedy, and very famous it became. Likewise, Johnny Spate's Till Death Us Do Part, where the father, a royal supporting, West Ham supporting patriot, rows eternally with his socialist Liverpudlian son-in-law. The patriarch, Alf Garnett, was always intended to be the butt of the joke, but Johnny Spade tells us that he received many letters along the lines of, "Thank you for letting Alf say what we all want to say." This was the model, Americans, for All in the Family, with its very own Alf Garnett, the blustering Archie Bunker. Britain has produced many fine situation comedies. Blackadder, for example, would have to be among the best. The first series shows Rowan Atkinson, that's Mr. Bean, as a rather timid and unlikable protagonist. Whereas the second, third, and fourth series, he stops being timid, becomes bold and unlikable, and that was the start of the famous Blackadder personage, the cowardly, mean, socially climbing, outward blaming, really quite nasty Edmund Blackadder, always taking it out on his sidekick Baldric. The scripts are very tight, the performances also, as well as being exceptionally funny, and a lot of the dialogue's sharp and witty. We can backstory Rowan Atkinson a little bit, as he was one of the main stars of Not the 9 O'Clock News, one of the many satirical news programmes that followed That Was the Week That Was. And then there's Fawlty Towers, where John Cleese of Monty Python plays, again, a very curmudgeonly and unpleasant Basil Fawlty, hotel proprietor and bully, but again, always the butt of the joke. And a better example of sarcasm it would be hard to find. In one episode, an old lady complains of the view from the window. Basil explains to her,
Well, may I ask what you were expecting to see out of a Torquay hotel bedroom window? Sydney Opera House, perhaps? The hanging gardens of Babylon? Herds of wildebeest sweeping majestically?
I expect to be able to see the sea.
You can see the sea. It's over there between the land and the sky.
and I'm doing what I tried to avoid now, which is giving a list of my favourite sitcoms, but feel free to find any of these. Father Ted has to be mentioned. I often amuse myself trying to imagine these sitcoms being pitched to, for example, the Spanish National Broadcasting Network. Here we have a situation where 3 priests have been banished. We don't quite know why. One seems to be for alcoholism, one, it is hinted at, for theft, and the third one, better not go there. And they've been shipped out to this island where they supposedly can't cause much trouble. But of course, a series of visitors ensures that trouble is just what we're going to get. It's a good example as well of the dynamics we're going to look at later in ensemble comedy between the supposed wise man who often isn't, which would be Father Ted Crilly, the Father Ted of the title, and his really, really, really dumb sidekick, Father Dougal Maguire, with a little bit of extra comic diversion provided by the disgustingly alcoholic Father Jack Hackett. As I say, I don't think that would get very far in many a country, so let's give thanks to the Open Society where it's due. Of course, the author of Father Ted, Graham Linehan, has come under attack from certain pressure groups. As I've commented, Monty Python wouldn't pass muster today, and even Friends has been criticised for the same reason of being undiverse. Rather than continue this eulogy, here we put our sociology spectacles on again and look at how the sitcom turns out to be a great expression of the mores of the times. We've already noticed how certain homosexual comedians manage to sneak gay humour in via puns and wordplay, and John Inman's characterisation of the very camp, effeminate gay in Are You Being Served served as something of an archetype of the gay man. And backing up John Inman's double entendres, we had the doughty Mrs. Slocum, who would pepper spray us with innuendo about her pet cat. But soon, I say soon, this is 1979, maybe 6 or 7 years later, we get a portrayal of a homosexual couple as intelligent, witty, in a way ordinary, in a sitcom called Agony. The Liverbirds made a splash. 2 single Liverpudlian ladies living together, and the trials and tribulations such people might experience. This is important, again, because it's 2 women characters, it's centred on them, and the scriptwriter was Carla Lane. So sitcom in comedy was opening the way for bigger parts for women to play at the writing and the acting level, a line which led us up to Ab Fab, as we knew the comedy Absolutely Fabulous, which again, if I tried to pitch that outside of Britain, it's two very boozy, very irresponsible women larking around, but in a very funny manner. The British obsession with class can be traced through from Steptoe and Son, which is clearly a portrayal of the lowest of the working class, through George and Mildred, Terry and June, sitcoms where the protagonists live in quite well-to-do semi-detached houses with nice big gardens which in The Good Life, the rather hippie middle-class couple try to grow their own marrows and tomatoes as the wannabe aristocrats next door look on in bewilderment. Richard Curtis, responsible for Blackadder amongst many other things, also wrote The Vicar of Dibley. Just 2 years after the ordination of women in 1992, Dawn French starred as the larger-than-life new vicar that everyone was expecting to be a man. So I'm sorry if you're a fan of Red Dwarf or Only Fools and Horses or The League of Gentlemen, but I had to restrict my choice somehow. And in any case, some of them will be popping up a little bit later on as we get up to date on the other strands of this brief history of English humour.